Hi and welcome back to the Discover Newport YouTube channel. My name's Kevin Heath. I'm a white badge guide for the city of Newport, and today's video we're going to be taking a walk along the riverfront, along the walkway, and be looking at the 5 bridges that make up central Newport's crossing points across the River Usk. 5 main bridges. I'm not going to be counting the M4 bridge or anything outside of the Newport sort of central region. So we're going from the town bridge all the way down to the transporter bridge. So I hope you enjoy this video, and I'll also be pointing out a few other things as we go along down past the walkway where there's anything of interest to make a note of. So we're going to start off at the first bridge. This is the town bridge, or the old town bridge as some people call it. I love this bridge. It's got a great character. It's 5 arches, very Edwardian in style, and it was completed in 1927, so just coming up to 100 years old. It's 97 years old. Before that, there was a stone bridge here, but the bridges here dated back to, we believe, the early 1100s. The first sort of document of a bridge was in a document granting land for the building of a bridge in 1097. So probably by the 1100s that bridge would have been built. It would have been a wooden bridge, and it would have been the lowest level along downstream of the River Usk for the bridge to be built. Couldn't really be built much before that because the indigenous Brits didn't really have the bridge building technology. It was really only when the continental engineers came across that they had the technology to build a bridge in this sort of situation. Very high fast flowing tides and very sort of unstable mud banks. So the first bridges would have been made out of wood. Before that, the next crossing point probably would have been in Carleon, where there was a fjording point at low tide, and the Romans probably built some sort of crossing there, but we don't really know. What we do know is that at 1097 there's a document just after the Norman invasion showing the granting of a land for the building of a bridge in this location. So before this bridge was built, there was a stone bridge here, which was built in 1800s. Before that it was the wooden bridges. In 1800 a stone 5-arch bridge was built. Now slightly different to the one we see here. This one is just a single span bridge. The one built in 1800s was a double span bridge. You had the main span here, and then just to the left of the castle there we had the canal. So it was bringing in lots of coal and iron ore and stuff down from the valleys down into Newport, and a canal run along there. So after the river bridge there was another secondary bridge that crossed over the canal to take you into town. By the time this bridge was built in 1927, the canal had long since gone into disrepair and been backfilled, and so there was no need for that second span of the bridge over the canal. The last scheduled weekly cargo barge from Newport up to Brecon stopped there running their service in 1915, and from 1915 the canal just wasn't used, and it was effectively backfilled by the time this bridge was put together. So a couple of interesting things about the old stone bridge before this one was built was that Howard Houdini got thrown from the bridge in 1913. He was shackled, chained up, and he was thrown from the bridge in one of his escape routines. Promptly arrested afterwards, charged with having an unlicensed performance in a public space, and he was locked up in the local police station, which was at Lower Dock Street. And just outside 65 Lower Dock Street you'll find a little plaque in the floor saying that it was from this police station that Howard Houdini escaped. He didn't stay locked up for very long. He did escape. So how much of that was actually planned in advance, we won't know, but it was the start of one of his world tours from here. So maybe that had something to do with the fact that of him being arrested and also escaping from both the chains after being thrown off the bridge and also escaping from the police cell that he had been put in after being arrested. So another thing of interest regarding the old stone bridge is that the Chartists at the Newport uprising had in their plans to blow it up. If it weren't for the fact that the Chartists were well and truly beaten very quickly by the soldiers at the Westgate Hotel, had they been fairly successful, the plan was to blow up the bridge, the stone bridge, to stop reinforcements from entering the town very quickly. But I'll do a lot more on the Chartist uprising and the Newport uprising in a separate video. This one is more about the bridges than the Chartists. But as a bit of a teaser, the Chartists were split into two branches. There was a moral force, which wanted to do peaceful protesting, and then there was a physical force, Chartists, who were very much into armed uprising and overthrowing the establishment. If they had the opportunity to do that, then they would. Now, very few people in Newport actually took part in that uprising. Most of it was people from outside the area, and one group of physical force Chartists that made their way down came from Glasgow. A large contingent came down from Glasgow to take part in that uprising. The leader of that group was a physical force Chartist by the name of Alan Pinkerton. Now, after the gun battle in Charter Square, the Glasgow contingent made a run for it, went on the run, made their way back to Scotland, but Alan Pinkerton, a known force Chartist, was to be arrested and brought to trial. So he remained on the run for about 2 to 3 years, maybe a little bit longer, before heading his way over to America for sanctuary and safety. And there he set up the Pinkerton Detective Agency. Now, the Pinkerton Detective Agency was pretty much a forerunner of the CIA and FBI. They were a major, big detection agency that had undercover operatives all over the USA. They also provided close protection for Abraham Lincoln. Alan Pinkerton was a bodyguard of Abraham Lincoln himself. So, had he not been from the Newport uprising, would Alan Pinkerton had made his way to America, and would the Pinkerton Detective Agency be set up? And this is quite an interesting one, because there are some characters associated with the Newport uprising. Alan Pinkerton was an avowed abolitionist. He wanted the slaves to be released. He was avowed as a working class hero. He said he wanted to protect the working classes. But the moment he set up his Pinkerton Detective Agency, the moment he had become part of the establishment and had become wealthy and powerful, he didn't see much harm in hiring out the Pinkerton Detective Agency to the Spanish government to run undercover operations in Cuba, where there was a revolution afoot, or attempted a revolution afoot, that would free the slaves and give every person an equal vote. He actually sent his agency to stop that from happening, undermining the leadership, giving the names of leadership to the Spanish for them to be arrested, and for that revolution never to have happened. Also, despite being someone avowed for the working classes, he saw no issues at all in sending his investigators and undercover operatives in to large companies in America to spy on the workers and to find out if they were trying to set up a union or fighting for union rights. And that information was then passed on to the business owners for relevant action to be taken against the workers, normally being fired. So, from somebody who came from Glasgow, was an unemployed cooper and a barrel maker, and an avowed abolitionist and an avowed Chartist, he very quickly became a member of the establishment and all that meant. But let's get back to this bridge. here over the River Usk. So this bridge was planned in the planning stages and got the permission for being built in 1921 and 1923. Now that was at the time of one of the depressions, the 1920-21 depression, and Newport was really hit really hard by that. Obviously with a downturn in trade, there was no coal needed, there was no iron needed, there was no steel being made, and the trade in the docks had come to almost a standstill. And at the height, 1 in 4 working men were unemployed. So in 1921, the plan was hatched to build this bridge and replace the old bridge as a way of creating employment to help try and tackle the poverty and the unemployment that came with that depression. What they did was they built a wooden bridge alongside the old stone bridge. They moved everything over to the wooden bridge, including all the power cables and gas cables. They put the tram lines and rerouted the tram across the wooden bridge. And then they dismantled the stone bridge and built this new bridge in its place in 1927. If you look at all of these what looks like gas lights over the top and alongside the balustrades, those have been replaced a few years ago, and they're now all energy efficient LED lights. That gives off a reminiscence of the old gas lights. Okay, what you'll find on the 4 pillars of each corner of the bridge is the Newport coat of arms. Now, there's a bit of a story for these. These featured on the cover of the single for the Stone Roses hit. I think it was called Love Spreads in 1994. Also featured on a lot of Stone Roses merchandise at the time, and also the album cover, which was Second Coming. Now, this became a very collectible item, and how people got them off, I don't know, but quite often they were stolen. Okay, so that's bridge number 1, the town bridge, or the old town bridge. Our second bridge is just down there, and it's the Footbridge. Right, as we walk down past the Riverfront Theatre, you're going to come to this statue or work of art here, and that was where the medieval ship was discovered when they were doing excavations, and at the same time they discovered a headless body. Now initially they thought it was maybe a crew member of the medieval ship, but sort of dating work meant it was a couple of 100 years older than the ship itself, so it was really by luck that the two were put together. However, I am going to do a video separately on the medieval ship. It's quite an important artefact for the UK. It's one of the oldest ships that was recovered, and it dates from the 1200s. But I will do a separate video on that. But this is the location of the discovery. Okay, so here we are. We're up at the Footbridge. It's one of my favourite bridges. A lovely design. It was designed to be reminiscent of the old wharfside cranes. Most of the foundations are on this side of the bank, and that was to stop the disturbance to the housing on the other side when it was being built, and also the river ecology, which on that side is actually better than on this side, because on this side we had the river wharves when Newport was a really busy port, but more about that in another video. And all across there, of course, was the city docks, well, the town docks. But here, this is the river bridge, built to carry 2,000 people at any one time, and it's a great vantage point for when we have flyovers by the RAF, and also for watching the fireworks on bonfire night and New Year's Eve. But a few things about this bridge. So the bridge was opened on the 12th of September 2006, which was also exactly 100 years after the opening of the Transporter Bridge, which we're going to actually go down and have a look at shortly. It was built as part of the major renovation and regeneration of Newport in the 2000s, and it connects the University Plaza on this side to Rodney Parade on the other side. So it's got a span of 476 feet, and the total height of the bridge up to there is 229 feet. So the main posts are made from rolled steel, and it's got over half a mile of cabling. So there is a claim to fame on this, which is pretty impressive. So at the Big Splash Festival of 2010, a Big Splash is a big weekend in Newport, a family fun weekend. In 2010, French circus performer Olivier Roustan undertook the highest wire walk to date at that time, when he traversed across the cable between the two top posts across there. That was a pretty impressive thing to do. One of the things that's a little bit of a shame over this bridge is that the height of the bridge at very high tide is only about 16 foot. So that pretty much restricts any sort of river passenger traffic. And I suppose at the time of this being designed and built, nobody really envisaged the river coming back to life. But just a couple of years ago, plans were sort of proposed to run a hydrofoil service from Cardiff to Newport to Bristol, and also maybe out to Weston-super-Mare various times throughout the day and the seasons. The problem came when it came to measure up how high this hydrofoil service would be, and it wouldn't fit under this bridge. Originally, the plans was for the service to finish at the old White Funnel pier at the top by the town bridge, but can't get under that bridge. So anything that they put together, if that hydrofoil service does ever come to fruition, will have to stop downstream of this bridge. So let's go on. We can see our next bridge just beyond that with the tall pillars, and that is our next bridge, and it's called the George Street Bridge. Okay, so here we are at bridge number 3. This is George Street Bridge. George Street is on this bank, the west bank, and it runs across to Corporation Road, I think, Commercial Road over on the east bank. This was built in 1962, being completed by 1964 and opened in 1964. In 2001, it was listed as a Grade 2 listed building because this was the first ever stayed cantilever bridge built in the UK. Now you can tell it's a cantilever bridge or cable stayed cantilever bridge because if you look at the towers, the cables go directly down to support the road surface. With a suspension bridge, you'll have one main cable between the two towers, which at an arc, and then you'll get vertical cables coming down to support the road surface. But this is supported directly by the cables, so it's a cable stayed cantilever bridge, first one ever built in the UK. So this bridge spans 500 feet, and it's the towers are 171 feet high. Originally, it was built to be a 6-lane bridge, so 3 lanes either side, but it finally came down to 4-lane bridge because at the time plans were in place for the M4. So with the M4 bridge being built, they didn't really think there was a need for this to be a 6-lane bridge, so it was finally finished as a 4-lane. So there's a couple of claims to fame for the bridge. The first one's a bit of notoriety really. Local free running group, the Feral Free Runners, climbed about 10 years ago now, climbed up to the top of the towers and then they slid down the wires to the bottom, making quite a viral hit on the videos on YouTube and various social media. But that happened about 10 years ago, more notoriety rather than fame. Fans of Casualty, if you ever watched BBC Casualty, will recognise this bridge as it featured in one of the episodes with a party limousine hanging halfway over the side. So that's the claim to fame for the George Street Bridge. Well, you can see the next bridge I'm going to go down to, which is City Bridge, just in the distance. It's a big white arc. So I'll head down that way, and there's a couple of things to point out on the way down there. I have to admit, I do quite like this bridge. I mean, it's very brutal in design and very functional. but it's very reminiscent of the 1950s and 60s and fits in very well with the urban environment of Newport at the time. Um, what I do like about the bridges of Newport is that they are all very different, all different designs and all different in characteristics. I think this is a good location to just have a look at the river, see how low it is. And you can see the tidal range of the river, which really impacted um, the docks here in Newport, especially the river wharves. Now, the smallest ships used to go all the way up to the centre of Newport and beyond, but some of the larger ships would have to stop down this way a little bit. And you can see just on the right there some of the buttresses where ships used to tie up to. You can see some remnants of the piers, and you've also got this larger sort of a dock area that a larger ship could go into. But the tides and the river really forced a shift in the docks and river traffic, particularly around the time of Sir Charles Morgan, who I looked at one of our videos, and we'll be looking at the river wharves and the docks and the history of the docks in another video. Right, I always trying to promote the local businesses. In the last video we did the Riverside bar here, about halfway between the town bridge and the transporter bridge. We have the Octopus Lounge, ice creams, coffees, cakes, nice place to take a break. And if it's still open on the way back, I'll pop in there and have a bit of a refreshment. And so Newport has a very strong maritime tradition, and you'll find around Newport various memorials to the Merchant Navy and the like. And this one is about the Arctic convoys. So you've got the Russian Convoy Club and the Merchant Navy and those who sailed the Arctic convoys. So this is quite a nice memorial in Newport. The main Merchant Navy memorial is opposite the police station, and there's obviously the main cenotaph in Newport, and also a number of local memorials. But this one, the Arctic convoys. So here we are, we're at bridge number 4. This is officially called City Bridge, although many people actually call it the SDR Bridge. As you can see on this western approach to the bridge up at the top, we have the Newport coat of arms. The one on the eastern side, I believe, doesn't, it's just on the one side. It is what they call a tied arch bridge or a bowstring bridge, and that means you've got the main supporting arches, and the bridge itself is under tension like a bowstring is, and that gives it its strength and its ability to withstand the weight of the traffic on board. It's a very modern bridge, one I actually quite like, very stylish. The arches sort of come together in the middle and then go back out, and at angles it can look as though the arches are actually crossing over each other, but in fact they're not, it's just an optical illusion. So the bridge was opened in 2004, and again it was part of this massive regeneration project that happened in Newport in the early 2000s. Big redevelopment of the road here. It was renamed the A48, and the A48, which used to go over George Street Bridge, was downgraded to a B road, and this is now really the main throughput of traffic for Newport, connecting up one side of Newport to the other. Not quite a bypass, but not far off it. So the bridge spans 650 feet. It was recognised by the British Steel Construction Awards in 2005 as being an example of the best of British bridge engineering. When the design contracts went out, a number of different styles of bridges were nominated for the contract, but this one pretty much won it. It's a very nice, very modern, stylish bridge, very different to the other bridges. and this is pretty much the southernmost crossing of the River Usk for permanent road traffic. The only other road bridge now, or bridge crossing, is the Transporter Bridge, which is a little further downstream. Now around the bridge, it's been very much landscaped, and there's quite a large open space down here. Now during COVID and the pandemic, this was very much a popular space for outdoor gyms and personal trainers. You'd often come down here and see gym classes taking place, martial arts classes taking place, particularly when it was banned from being done indoors. Very attractive area. There's seating around, gardens and landscaping. Very good area to come to. Well, I think this is going to be a good place to do the Transporter Bridge from. Pointless me getting much closer because the bridge is currently undergoing an £8 million refurbishment and a rebuilding of the visitor centre. If I get up close, all you're going to see is scaffolding and builders merchants. The gates, the bridge itself is fenced off, so I can't do much in the way of a close-up. And if I walk much further up, I'm going to be joining the main road, and it's just going to be too much road noise for the commentary. But first, let's have a quick look at the old dock gates that led to the town docks. Okay, so this is pretty much what's left of the town dock gate. It's all overgrown now with reeds. The gate and the dock passageway would go up to where the Costers is, and you've got the Usk Rage or Cage Rage just beyond there. And that the Costers, that's where it opened out into the actual docks, the old docks, before the extension was built. And this was built and funded by Sir Charles Morgan, who we did a piece on. We'll take a closer look at the docks in another video. But this was entrance to the old town docks coming in off the river. So let's go back down and have a look at the Transporter Bridge. Right, I've wandered down to one of my favourite fishing spots, which gives me a little bit better view, and is far enough away from the road to help cut down on the traffic. So this is the Transporter Bridge, due to reopen next year. It's running a little bit late, but it should hopefully open early next year. I'll do a full video on this once it does reopen, so it's only going to be a quick broad overlook today. There is a knowledge module being put together for tour guides. So once that's all done, I'll do a full video on it. As you can see over on the far bank, you might just be able to work out the powerhouse and the control house. That runs two 35 horsepower electric motors, which is what moves the sledge across, or the gondola across the river. 1900, the bridge was given approval by Parliament to be built. 1900, the town was growing really rapidly. Most of the people lived on this west side around Pill. This was the residential area. But land was coming in short supply, and industry was moving over to the east bank. And there was going to be a really large steel mill being built, and they needed to get people from where they lived to where they worked fairly quickly without too much inconvenience. Because until then, until this bridge was built, people had to walk all the way up to the town bridge, the old town bridge, cross the river there, and then walk all the way back down here to the factories and the mills. So the biggest issue they had with that was that if their people had to walk from Pill up to the old town bridge and back down to the work, the steelworks or whatever, it was 5 miles. And along that 5-mile route, there were 14 pubs. So the industrialists were a little bit concerned as to what sort of state their workers would turn up in if they had to walk past those 14 pubs. And there was also issues, of course, with them going back home after, regarding getting back to the families and spending the money in the pubs en route. And so it was decided a bridge was needed. And they put out tender, looked at various different designs. They looked at a standard bridge, they looked at doing a swing bridge, they looked at tunnelling, none of which was suitable for the tides or the location because of the banks. So eventually, town council or town representatives went to have a look at a bridge in Rouen in France, a transport bridge down there, and decided that was a good option. And it was decided that this bridge should be built for Newport. So the bridge got its parliamentary approval in 1900. It took about 4 or 5 years to build, and eventually it opened on the 12th of September 1906. And it was opened by Lord Tredegar of Tredegar House, who provided a lot of funding for this. So there was 2 ways you could cross the bridge. You could pay a small toll and go the comfortable way, which was on the gondola, or you could go for free by walking up the steps, walking across the gantry, and then walking back down the steps. So many people chose the free option that eventually it was decided to scrap the toll, and it was a free bridge up until the mid-1900s when tolls were reintroduced. As I say, this is just going to be a short video on this, or short section on this bridge, because when the bridge is fully reopened, I'll do a full video on it, as it's such a landmark. It is a scheduled monument in Wales, and also listed Grade 1 building because of its importance. Right, so I hope you've enjoyed today's video. The 5 bridges of Newport along the River Walkway. Really nice walkway, well worth doing if you come into Newport. Do venture out and explore Newport. There's a lot here on offer. So until my next video, thanks for watching. If you do need a tour guide for your visit to Newport and the surrounding area, my contact details are on the YouTube channel or on the website discovernewport.wales.